Good evening and welcome to the Unfiltered Political Lens. Tonight we're stepping into a conversation that is larger than politics, larger than technology, and perhaps larger than any single issue facing the United States in the digital age. It is a conversation about liberty, security, constitutional government, artificial intelligence, and the future of privacy in America. It is a conversation that affects Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, libertarians and independents alike, because regardless of where they stand politically, every one of their lives under the same Constitution, and every one of us will experience the consequences of the technological decisions being made today. This is not a discussion about fear, and it is not an accusation against any one company, agency, or administration. Instead, it is an invitation to examine how rapidly advancing technology is changing the relationship between citizens and the institutions that govern them. Throughout history, every generation has confronted a challenge that forced it to redefine the balance between freedom and security. Previous generations confronted world wars, economic collapse, organized crime, the Cold War, and international terrorism. Our generation is confronting something far less visible, but potentially just as significant, which is the rise of a society where technology can observe, record, organize, and analyze human activity on a scale never before possible. Across the United States, automated license plate readers, commonly known as ALPRs, have become an increasingly familiar part of the American landscape. Companies such as Flock Safety have installed thousands of cameras at neighborhood entrances, intersections, schools, shopping centers, apartment complexes, business districts, and public roadways. Most Americans pass these cameras every day without noticing them. Their stated purpose is straightforward and for many communities compelling. They are designed to assist law enforcement by identifying stolen vehicles, locating missing persons, providing investigative leads, and helping solve crimes more efficiently. Numerous police departments have credited these systems with recovering stolen property, identifying suspects involved in violent crimes, and assisting in time-sensitive investigations where every minute matters. These successes are real and they deserve to be acknowledged. The public safety is one of the fundamental responsibilities of our government, and few people would argue that law enforcement should ignore technology capable of helping rescue victims or apprehend dangerous criminals. But history reminds us that every powerful innovation carries consequences beyond its original purpose. The printing press revolutionized communication while also spreading propaganda. Radio united nations while becoming a powerful instrument of wartime influence. The television transformed politics, advertising, and public opinion. The internet likewise connected billions of people while simultaneously creating unprecedented concerns about cybersecurity, misinformation, and personal privacy. Artificial intelligence now promises to become the next technological revolution, and the surveillance technology sits directly at the intersection of AI data analytics, cloud computing, and public safety. The question is no longer whether surveillance technology works by many measurable standards. It does. The deeper question is what happens when these technologies become so advanced that they can reconstruct years of personal database movements, routines, and associations in seconds. At what point does technology capability begin changing the relationships between citizens and their constitutional governments? To understand why this debate matters, we have to step backward before moving forward. The United States was founded by individuals who distrusted concentrated government power. The founders had experienced broad searches, intrusive inspections, and the sweeping government authority under British rule. They had believed liberty required limits, not merely on bad governments, but on all governments. That philosophy became embedded in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The Fourth Amendment protects Americans against unreasonable searches and seizures, reflecting a broader principle that government authority should operate within defined constitutional boundaries. When those words were written in 1791, there were no automobiles, no satellites, and no artificial intelligence, no cloud computing, and certainly no nationwide digital surveillance networks. Yet the Constitution was never intended to protect only 18th century technology. It was written around enduring principles designed to survive technological change. The founders understood something timeless about human nature. The power tends to expand unless meaningful limits exist. Today, we are witnessing technological progress at a pace that constitutional law struggles to match. Consider how dramatically life has changed during the past 2 decades alone. Smartphones accompany us almost everywhere. Navigation systems continuously calculate routes. Vehicles increasingly function as rolling computers. Smart homes connect everyday appliances to the internet. Financial transactions generate electronic records. Security cameras have become common in homes and businesses, and artificial intelligence analyzes enormous amounts of information with remarkable speed. However, individually, each innovation offers practical benefits. Collectively, they create something previous generations never experienced. An environment where extraordinary amounts of information can exist about ordinary people simply living ordinary lives. The information has become one of the world's most valuable resources. Governments use it to improve the services and investigate crimes. Businesses use it to understand markets and consumer behavior. Technology companies use it to personalize experiences, but the challenge is determining where legitimate information gathering ends and excessive surveillance begins. Supporters of expanding surveillance technology often make a straightforward argument. They point out that anyone driving on a public road can already be observed by other motorists, pedestrians, or police officers. From that perspective, automated license plate readers merely record what anyone could already see. The critics respond that technology had fundamentally changed the nature of observation itself. Human beings forget. Computers remember. A passerby might notice your vehicle for a few seconds before moving on with their day. A digital system can potentially preserve that observation, organize it with millions of others, and make it searchable months or years later, subject to applicable policies and legal access. One observation reveals very little. Thousands of observations collected over time can reveal routines, habits, travel patterns, and associations. This difference between isolated observation and long-term aggregation lies at the heart of today's constitutional debate. Artificial intelligence amplifies these capabilities dramatically. The cameras collect the information, but AI increasingly interprets it. Modern analytic systems can identify recurring travel routes, also recognizing unusual activity, compare historical records, and detect patterns that would be nearly impossible to human investigators to discover manually. The used responsibility, these capabilities can help locate missing children, identify suspects in violent crimes, and accelerate the investigations where lives may depend upon speed. All those are meaningful benefits that should not be dismissed, yet at the same time, analytical capabilities also raise a broader question about proportionality, oversight, and constitutional safeguards. If algorithms can reconstruct years of movement, history within moments, what standards should govern when and how those capabilities are used? Who determines what constitutes appropriate access and what oversight exists? How transparent should these systems be to the public they ultimately serve? These questions become even more important when viewed through the lens of American history. Throughout different periods, governments have expanded the investigative authority in response to genuine public safety concerns. Whether organized crime, wartime espionage, domestic terrorism, cybercrime, and violent criminal organizations, they have all prompted calls for stronger investigative tools. Many of those decisions were made with sincere intentions to protect the public. Yet history also demonstrates that the temporary authority sometimes becomes permanent institutions, and infrastructure created for one purpose may later be adapted for another. That observation does not prove future misuse, nor does it suggest that every surveillance program inevitably expands beyond its original mission. It does suggest, however, that democratic societies benefit from asking difficult questions before technological systems become deeply embedded in everyday life rather than waiting until afterward. One of the most common phrases heard during discussions about privacy is if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. On its surface, the statement sounds reasonable, but our constitutional rights have never depended upon whether someone has something to hide. The Constitution protects the freedom of speech, not because every opinion is popular, but because the unpopular opinions deserve protection as well. Freedom of religion exists not merely for the majority faiths, but also for minority beliefs. Due process protects individuals before the guilt has been established. Likewise, privacy has historically been understood as preserving a sphere of personal autonomy in which ordinary citizens can live without unnecessary government intrusion. Most Americans do not expect every destination they visit, or every organization they join, or every doctor they consult, every religious service they attend, or every political event they participate in to become part of a permanent searchable historical record. That expectation of personal space has long been entwined with the broader concept of our liberty. At the same time, constitutional liberty and public safety should never be presented as mutually exclusive goals. Law enforcement officers confront increasingly sophisticated criminal organizations, human trafficking networks, organized retail theft, cybercrime, and violent offenders who often exploit the technologies themselves. The communities rightly expect the police departments to use lawful and effective tools capable of protecting the innocent lives. Our families whose loved ones have been rescued because investigators rapidly identified a suspect vehicle throughout automated technology, which often view these systems very differently than abstract constitutional discussions. Those experiences matter because they remind us that behind every policy debate are real victims, real families, and real communities seeking protection. The challenge, therefore, is not choosing between liberty and safety. The challenge is preserving both without allowing either objective to gradually overwhelm the other. Perhaps that is why oversight matters as much as technology itself. Questions surrounding surveillance rarely begin or end with cameras alone. They extend to issues of transparency, data retention, judicial review, legislative oversight, cybersecurity, accountability, and public trust. How long should the information be stored? Under what circumstances should the investigators access historical records? Should warrants be required in certain situations? And what safeguards should prevent unauthorized use? How should citizens be informed about the technologies operating within their communities? These are not merely technological questions. They are constitutional questions because they define the boundaries between government authority and individual liberty within a democratic republic. As artificial intelligence continues advancing, these questions will only become more significant. Whether it be AI systems, which will become faster, more accurate, and more capable of recognizing relationships hidden within enormous data sets. Computing power will continue increasing and the data storage will become less expensive. New technologies that appear extraordinary today may seem entirely ordinary within another decade. The children born today, however, may grow up in a world where interconnected surveillance systems are simply accepted as part of everyday life because they have never experienced anything different. Whether that future strengthens our constitutional democracy or it gradually reshapes its dependence not upon technology alone, but upon the choices the citizens, lawmakers, courts, and communities make while these technologies are still evolving. And perhaps the most important realization is that technology itself is morally neutral. The cameras possess no political ideology. Artificial intelligence has no independent constitutional philosophy. And our human beings determine how the technology is designed, governed, regulated, and used. Laws establish boundaries, and courts interpret the constitutional protections. The legislature debates policy. Citizens participate in public discussions. Journalists investigate, and researchers evaluate the evidence. Every one of these institutions plays a role in ensuring technological innovation remains accountable to democratic principles. The American constitutional system has intentionally designed to encourage this ongoing dialogue because the freedoms have never been something preserved automatically. It requires informed citizens willing to ask thoughtful questions about the powers exercised in their name. So perhaps the question we should leave with tonight is not whether flock cameras or any single surveillance technology are inherently good or inherently bad. That question oversimplifies an issue of extraordinary complexity. A more meaningful question is whether the United States can continue embracing innovation while preserving the constitutional principles that have defined the American experiment for nearly 2.5 centuries. Can artificial intelligence strengthen public safety without weakening individual liberties? Can technological progress remain consistent with the Fourth Amendment? Can transparency, accountability, and democratic oversight evolve as rapidly as technology itself? Those questions deserve careful consideration because the answers will influence not only today's investigations, but also tomorrow's understanding of freedom itself. History rarely announces the moments that later generations consider turning points more often. Profound change arrives gradually through a series of decisions that each appear reasonable when viewed in isolation. Only years later does society recognize how dramatically those individual choices transformed our everyday life. Rather, future historians describe this era as one in which America successfully balanced innovation with liberty, or one in which technology quietly occupied constitutional safeguards, and will it depend upon decisions being made right now? That responsibility belongs not only to the elected officials or technology companies, but to every citizen who values both public safety and constitutional government. The future of surveillance is ultimately not a story about the cameras. It is a story about the freedom, responsibility, accountability, and the enduring challenge of preserving our liberty in an age of unprecedented technological capabilities. Thank you for joining me on this edition of the Unfiltered Political Lens. If this discussion challenged you to think differently, share it with someone else and continue the conversation respectfully in the comments below. And until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking difficult questions. And as always, I want to thank you for watching today, and we'll see you in the next episode. And as always, peace. Thanks for watching.